we're going to demonstrate the user management features here. So we're going to log in first. As that does that, you'll see we get into the normal screen and the pop-up as if I were using this for the first time if I haven't got rid of the window and told it to not show it again. And we're not going to do a project because we're going to do user management. Couple of different ways, 3 different ways really to get to these screens. First up, using this icon in the corner, the waffle icon, you can go to the settings area. Second way, the way I tend to follow, collaboration tab. Again, there's some links and the users and groups one in there. Third way, as you'll see, we're opening settings.engageprocess.com. So you could go direct to that if you bookmark it. It's completely up to you. Engage does single sign-on, so once you've logged into the main area, you're going to log in automatically. If you went straight to settings, then you would need to log in as normal. And we're at the users and groups area. First thing I would think about when we're setting these up, best practice for any system, is you're probably going to want to set up some groups to help you organize your users. I would always start with a default of 2 groups, one for my normal modeler users and one for my system admin users. It may be that depending on your organization and what you want to achieve, you want to have more groups set up, but it's always easier to organize people into groups, set up a couple of groups, give them the right permissions, and then add the people into the groups, and it's easier and tidier generally to do that. So we'll start by navigating the screens. You can see there is an add user, add group, export, import. We're going to start with adding a group. At the bottom here you do have your licenses available to you that is shown, so you can check in on that at any point. So if we look at the add groups, quite simple, this is quite intuitive. We'll add a group and we'll say it's modeler users. You can give it a short description, people who will be mapping. So we've done that now, and you can see modeler users has been created, and we've got these functions around the side where we can actually add some of the permissions and then add the members. So we'll go to the permissions first. I'll add those. In the permissions here you've got various options. As a default, when you add a modeler user, they're going to be able to use the modeler by default, so that is the barest minimum they would need. If you don't give them this first setting, project creator, it means your system admins will need to set up a particular project or set of projects for people to use and then give them access in the front end of the tool. We won't go into that too much today, but I will reference it back in a minute when we come back to one of the other functions. So project creator privilege, as I say, it's up to you in terms of whether you're going to give that to everyone or whether you're going to control the projects. For this example, I'll give them project creator. Team board creator says that a user can create team boards, and again there is a team board user privilege to allow them to use Teamboard, but this is about saying whether they can create Teamboards. So we'll say in this example they can create Teamboards. Modeling Manager, the next privilege. You may want to decide this is a system admin privilege, or you may be happy that all of your modelers can do this, and again it depends on your setup. If you've got a larger setup, you might be want to be a lot more controlled. If you've got a smaller setup, you might need all of your 4 or 5 analysts to be able to do this. But this is basically saying I can set up and manage icon sets and icon styles and description templates. So I'll be able to add icons and templates into there. So we'll say yes to that for the moment. Tables Manager. Everyone can create tables locally in a project, but if you want people to be able to create central tables, so it's a really good practice to set up central tables. There's a couple that I think really are vital to do, and that would be thinking about your IT systems tables and your roles tables you might want to set up centrally, so it's a case that all modeler users will be using the roles and the IT systems you've defined in the back end. Again, it's a bit like Modeling Manager, depending on your team structure and the way you want to do this. You may want to give it to modelers, or if you've got a very small team, or if you've got a larger team, you might want to take some control of it and only have system admins doing it. So we'll set this up for a small team for the moment, and we'll say we'll give them tables. But do be careful, you know, with Modeling Manager and with tables, you don't want people to create masses of icons, duplicate icons. Likewise, you don't want to have central tables running and then be creating them in any which way. So the idea with Tables Manager is that you've got a central repository of tables and everyone's using the same and it's all consistent. Last 4 I won't add on to the modelers. So you've got Publisher, and that is the rights to handle the permanent publishing of processes. I say permanent, you can obviously take them back, but where you're just sharing processes, because any modeler will be able to share. This is where you want to actually publish. So you're going to submit to the publisher, and you're potentially going to set up a process handbook for your organization and put all processes into it and manage those processes and update those processes and gather feedback. Subscription Manager will just give your users a link so that they can click through, see what subscription they got and the end date. So again, it's a system admin privilege. User Manager, certainly a system admin privilege because you want to control your users. And Dashboard User is a function that will only be there if you're an enterprise customer. So there are data dashboards for enterprise customers to help them be able to manage and understand what people are achieving, who's mapped what, when, all of those sorts of things are in Dashboard User. So a fairly standard setup here, saying Project Creator and Teamboard Creator definitely. Modeling Manager and Tables Manager might go in the other group, and we'll demonstrate the other group now. So click OK. That's now created. You can see the roles that are in there. We've got no members of the group at the moment, but we're going to add a couple of members in to show you that function as well. So we'll just do another group, same again, but system admin. So very inspirational description there. we've got that group, and we're going to do the same again with that group. And we are just going to say, actually, in this particular instance, it doesn't matter if they overlap, so we'll say basically a system admin user gets everything. So we'll put all those privileges against system admin, they'll have everything. That's great. I've got two groups set up now to land and catch my users. So I'm just going to add a user, and for the sake of this, it's an example, so I'm just going to do training 1, and we will do training 1 at we are lean and agile. And you'll see there's a red error message underneath because your login, your username needs to be an email format. Doesn't need to be a real email, but there are notifications and things that will go from the system, so it's obviously better. But it just needs to be an email format. So things like when you're setting up potentially viewer users later on, you might not use a real email because you're not going to actually give that email to anybody. It's not a personal email, it's more like a group of people who need to be able to view processes, so a group of stakeholders. So you may use emails that you want. Password setup. This will allow you to set up the passwords, and the passwords have got to be 8 characters and have got to have at least uppercase, lowercase and a number. So I'm just going to set that one up now. Not very interesting to watch me type. Languages, you're going to be looking at English, I'm sure. There is Dutch in there if you're very good with Dutch. Quite a difficult language to use, but and learn. And last one to bear in mind, allow this user to change his or her password. Now, obviously for normal users you are going to tick this, and what that will mean is you'll send them the password, the username, the first time they log in. System will prompt them to change their password. When you're setting up viewer users, you might want to take the tick out of this, because you're going to set up a viewer user with a view to sending them a process with a link with the username embedded in it, which will mean you send it out to 20 stakeholders. First stakeholder goes in. If you don't take the tick out of this, first stakeholder goes in, gets told to change the password, changes it, and that means the link doesn't work anymore. So for viewer users, I would advise you take the tick out here. For normal users, absolutely not. So we're going to set up another user as well. You'll see the default when I add someone, they always get the modeler. We'll come back to that in a second. I'm just going to set up a second user, and I'm going to set up system admin 1, and we'll call that SA1 at password again going in here. Obviously remember the password, you're going to have to let people know this. You can reset the password in this area, and I'll show you that in a second when we got set up. So same again, leave it on English, leave the tick in there. 2 users, 2 groups set up. It's likely you're going to be setting up a few more users than that. You might even want more groups. You might want a viewer user group. You might want a team board group. You might want to break down the permissions even more granularly and have even more groups. And you might even want to have groups If you've got distributed teams, maybe you've got some working in certain directorates and you want to split them out because they're going to access different things and you want to manage them together. You might want to create directorate groups. Obviously, the world's your oyster with that. So we're just going to have a quick look at setting up my training user and adding them to a group and just sorting their licenses out. Two ways you can add to a group. You can either go to the actual user here, so if I click and highlight my training one, I could go to the user and add a group to them, or I could go to the group, so modeler users, and I could add members there. So two ways you can do it. Pop up a dialog box, either way works. Add people in, you've got a list of who's in the system and you can put them in the groups there. So I'll just go to the user and we'll just check the user privileges here. First options you've got is licenses. By default, when you set someone up, they're going to be given a modeler license. If you want them to be a viewer only, take the tick out of modeler and add them to viewer. Simple enough. Something to bear in mind, if they are a modeler, they are a viewer user as well, so you don't need to tick both and you'll see it's actually grayed out. And I may want to add them as a team board user. So for this example, I'm going to add them as a team board user as well, because they're going to be modeling in the system. So I want them to be able to use the team board functionality, the Kanban boards, to help manage the projects and share information and allocate tasks. So I'm going to add that one. First up, that's set up. So you can see up here the licenses are updated now. Again, I'm highlighted on the training user. Roles, I'm not going to add to the user because I'm going to use the group for that. And I add the group, and I'm going to add the modeler user group, and there you go. You'll see the roles have now been updated that this user can do. And I'm just going to repeat the process for the system admin user as well. So we'll go into system admin, assign revoke licenses. System admin, I would say, definitely is going to want team board in there, and adding the group of system admin. And there you go. That's some users set up. The only other things we'll probably want to cover off, obviously you could add some viewer users, much the same thing. Make sure to take the tick out of passwords. But the only other thing we want to show you is just some of the other features around here. So we'll just bear in mind, obviously edit will allow me, if I've made a mistake, to correct any of those details. So I can go into the user, correct them, and change password. And change password. Never happens, obviously, that a user forgets their password, goes on holiday for a week, can't remember it. If you need to change a password, you can change the password here, and depending on what the tick is against them in the user area, it will either force them to change a password or not if you haven't got the tick in there saying they can change their password. And one that you'll definitely come to at a point, and it's a real useful function, is copy authorization. So use case would be user A leaves or goes out of your team. User A has created a couple of projects, and they're their projects. They haven't added any authorization back in the modeler. Just to repeat that within the modeler, when a project is set up, the default behavior is that the person who set it up has access, and they then have to give the access to whoever they need to, depending on the way you want to set up access to projects in your organization. So user A gone off, left the team, 2 projects sitting there that would be potentially orphaned if I wanted to delete that user. Actually, if I went to delete the user, the system would tell me, you can't delete the user. Excuse me. You can't delete the user because they have projects that only they can access. And this is where copy authorization comes into its own. So copy authorization, in a very simple way, I could go to me as a user thinking that I'm now leaving, I want to get rid of Andy. So first up, what I've got to do is transfer Andy's projects access to another person or another group. So I can say copy authorization. Now I'm not going to go fully through this, but you'll see the function is very, very intuitive. Hit copy authorization when Andy is highlighted. Dialog box comes up and says, which user or group do you want to add that to? Now you might want to add it to multiple users and multiple groups, where you just go through it and do it individually and add them. So I could just say, well, Andy was a modeler, so I'm gonna click modeler users and add Andy's authorizations into that group, so everyone in that group would access it. Or likewise, I might put it down to an individual user, and then that user inherits. What that will enable me to do after I've done it, I'll just cancel that one. It'll enable me then to go back and manage Andy out of the system. So I can then free up that license that Andy is using and give it to the next person who's joining the team. And in reality, that's probably, that is the user functionality features. Worth mentioning, I guess, whilst we're here, just if you are limited on users, Engage automatically logs you out of the system after the session times out, but you might have maybe a 15-minute period where someone's just X'd out of the system. You need the license, it's holding the session cookie for a short while. You might need to kick them out. And if you do have a limited concurrency license, you may need to do this occasionally. So in active sessions, I could just see what users are currently logged into the system. And I always say you want to speak to this user before you do this, but because Engage auto saves, if you did kick them out, it wouldn't be like you've lost the whole map, but you would only lose the last action. So if I did need to free up some sessions, as you can see, I'm in here at the moment. I can click on that one and I can choose to kill the session. So that is users setup. Now, hopefully that helps, and hopefully that's a useful quick video to give you an overview of some of the functions you will need to set up your users and your groups in the system. If you did want to talk about the export and import, it's not a very well used features, needs a bit of an explanation obviously because it's an import export. Obviously export's very easy, just click export and it'll export into Excel. Import's a bit different, you need to have it set up correctly to import, so get in contact if you need to hear more about that sort of stuff.